Okay, so I'm going to find my PowerPoint. I want to go back to this question, continuing just a little bit with the lecture, but then I'm going to focus, I hope, I'm going to focus on, sorry, someone's eating, I want some. Focus on Alright. We know it. Come on. I'm going to focus on this for a few minutes, this book, and then try and use this as a helpful tool for you to think about your assignments. And I want to volunteer to give up. And the benefit from this is you give me the material of your midterm, and we will sharpen it up so it becomes a really strong essay, I hope. At least that's what happened in the morning class. Let's hope it will happen in the afternoon. But I wanted to talk to you about this chapter and how important it is. And I recommend you read it. It's a long read, too long for 1 week, but you can, I mean, you're all reading this book anyway, right? As I said, this book is the most important book ever written in the social sciences. The most important social scientist, although he didn't have an academic job, but the most important book in sociology there has been. So I would read it. For women, the women among you, Marx actually said to Kugelman, the publisher's wife, she said, wow, you know, where do I start? And she said, this chapter would be a good place to start. And it wasn't that he was saying that this chapter is easy and so on, but in this chapter, there are issues that she was interested in. And she was more of his, they would meet occasionally at health resorts and so on. She was more Marxist, because Marx was sick a lot. He went on these spas. She would meet and debate with Marx a lot more than her husband, Kugelman, the publisher. She was not just a German wife, so to speak. So, Ngay Lao Dong. And it's a powerful chapter. Now, in the chapter, Marx relies on it's a kind of ethnographic chapter. The first 10, it's in the English, it's chapter 10. In the Tingviet, it's chapter 8. The first 7 chapters lay out the concepts you need for an analysis of the economic system that dominates those societies we call capitalist. Right? So, value, surplus labor, commodity, money, general equivalent, relative and surplus, relative and absolute, surplus value, valorization, right? And this chapter 8 is kind of a hinge in the book, I think, because it's where it turns from, right, you've got your core concepts, now and that's very abstract, right? He keeps on saying, at first look, the commodity is this thing. If we keep all these other things aside, we can see that money is this. And it starts to complicate the picture and make the picture more real. And afterwards, it's like the rings of complexity become more and more. And he's moving from, in this chapter, a very important move that the rest of the book rehearses over and over, from the individual worker and the individual commodity to a commodity system and the collective worker. Now, this is, as I said, chapter 8 in Ting Viet. It's chapter 10 in English, because the English translation done by Abeling and others split up chapter 5 into a couple of different bits. So they gained 2 chapters along the way. Actually, anyway, that's sort of irrelevant because the original version of Capital, which was published in 1867, had this chapter as part 4 of chapter 3. Chapter 3, it was a part of chapter 3, but it was divided up differently. Let's get this down as a kind of thing. So 1867, well, Marx starts writing 1856, 7, he writes the Grundrisse, which is the groundwork, Grundrisse, the groundwork for the study of capital. It was after the financial crisis of 1856 had not led to a revolutionary upsurge in Europe anyway. It did in India, and Marx followed that, but they were expecting a crisis to have a political consequence in Europe. It didn't, so he hits the library to make an analysis of capital. But he doesn't finish that work. He sets aside the 7 notebooks of the Grundrisse and starts again. In 61, 63, 63, 65, he writes basically the 3 volumes of Capital in draft form, but still not the final form. It's only till 1867 that he carries the manuscript personally from England to Hamburg to hand it over to the publisher. Like it's almost like he can't trust the post or trust anyone else to touch it. He doesn't really want to let go of it because it's always unfinished for him. Elsewhere we talk about unfinished business with Marx. It's almost a pathological condition. But the version we read is not the translation of Das Kapital of 1867, because the version we read is the 1890 4th German edition. So there was 1872 and 1887. This version had some additions and changes in the German. And so we read, and so did this, we read this version. This was a correction of a few things from that version, but pretty much the same. So what happened here? In French, in Ting Fap, in 1872 to 1875, in Ting Fap, Marx rewrote each chapter on a monthly basis, and it was published in a serialization in French. And that was the last one that Marx worked on, right? Because, I'm not there. He dies in 1883. Jetroy. Oh, he's dead, right? So the last one he worked on himself, beside the copy we find in his library, the German copy where he made further changes in handwriting, but they've not been incorporated. The last version, he's taken 20 years to write the thing, finally got it out, and then 5 years later he's rewriting it again. That's pathological, right? What happened to make him write it again? How's your history? What events happened to make him think, well, my book, I've got to do it next in French and I need to rewrite it? Anyone good at history? Communist history, most significant event in the history of communist state formation. 1871, the Commune. The French workers in Paris, Germany was invading Paris, the French army had been defeated. The Parisian workers and workers across the whole country, but mainly supported in Paris, rose up and they built the first dictatorship of the proletariat. The first workers' government, and it lasted 3 months. They were called the communards, the sans-culottes, people without uniform, fighters without trousers. They built the first completely participatory, radically democratic workers' state. And they were then, the Germans let the prisoners from the French army out, and they were then repressed viciously by the French army and the French state, the king, the emperor, and Thiers, a guy called Thiers, who was parliamentarian but was responsible really for a massacre. But recognizing this uprising, I mean, Marx hadn't supported it. He thought it was not the time for an uprising, or that the working class were not organized enough and ready. But he then, as soon as it started happening, he got behind it, wrote lots of journal articles, newspaper articles talking about it, was accused of being the organizer, but he wasn't. Members of the International Working Men's Association, Jenny should have got involved. They were involved, of course, because the leading members of the proletariat were also the leading members of the IWMA. But they were massacred. They were basically, the communards, women and children and fighters were lined up against walls and shot, or they were deported. Some of them were deported to Condal, to the French prison on the island that I visited just a couple of weeks ago and saw the mannequins, right? And as well as the prison island, Devil's Island in French Guyana, and to New Caledonia. They were exiled from France, if they weren't killed outright, or they escaped to England. And many of them stayed temporarily in Marx's house because he was looking after these refugees, right? And then in the next year, he started to rewrite Capital for the French working class and to make it more readily readable for them and accessible. He broke the chapters up differently so that chapter 3.4 became chapter 8, and some 60 to 100 pages were added that are not, still 60 pages were not even in the 1890 version. Marx's daughter Eleanor and Engels gathered together the material from the French and put it into the new translation, the new edition that they were doing in 1887, but not all of them got there. But the version that we translate into English is and into Tingret is the 1890 version. But to make the book accessible to an organized uprising, that was Marx's, what we call the implied reader. When you write something, you think about who your reader will be. And his reader in this case was immediately those workers that were rising up in France. Not obviously successfully, but still. Now, it's interesting then to look at the structure of the chapter. I'll get you to read a little bit. I'll get you to read some. This is the very beginning of the chapter. Just maybe the first paragraph. Nice and loud. Yeah, please.
Okay. To this, it's hot.
Here to there. Starting with chúng ta.
Yeah. Giới hạn của ngày lao động. Chúng ta xuất phát từ giả thiết cho rằng sức lao động được mua và bán theo giá trị của nó. Giá trị của nó cũng như giá trị của bất kỳ hàng hóa nào khác được quyết định bởi thời gian lao động cần thiết để sản xuất ra nó. Vậy, xét theo mức trung bình, nếu việc sản xuất ra những tư liệu sinh hoạt hàng ngày cần thiết cho người công nhân phải tốn mất 6 giờ, thì trung bình anh ta phải làm việc 6 giờ mỗi ngày để hàng ngày sản xuất ra sức lao động của bản thân mình, hay là để tái sản xuất ra cái giá trị mà anh ta nhận được khi bán sức lao động đó. Như vậy, bộ phận cần thiết của ngày lao động của anh ta là 6 giờ, và nếu mọi điều kiện khác vẫn như cũ thì đó là một đại lượng đã cho sẵn. Nhưng với điều đó, bản thân đại lượng ngày lao động cũng chưa phải đã được xác định.
And from here, this is Nung Bong Van Kong Nan, yeah. So from here, this to about there, to there,
To this part.
there.
Okay.
From there, from the. Okay, listen up. What's happening here now? It's really important.
Như thế là nhà tư bản, viện và quy luật trao đổi hàng hóa giống như tất cả những người mua khác. Hắn ta cũng cố gắng tận dụng cái giá trị sử dụng của hàng hóa của hắn ta, nhưng bỗng nhiên lại vang lên tiếng nói của người công nhân, một tiếng nói mà cho đến nay vẫn bị át đi trong tiếng ồn náo nhiệt của quá trình sản xuất. Hàng hóa mà tôi bán cho anh thì khác với đám hàng hóa khác, vì việc tiêu dùng nó tạo ra giá trị, hơn nữa lại tạo ra một giá trị lớn hơn giá trị của bản thân nó. Chính vì vậy mà anh mới mua nó. Cái mà đối với anh là sự tăng thêm của tư bản, thì đối với tôi đó là sự chi phí phụ thêm về sức lao động. Trên thị trường, anh và tôi chỉ biết có một quy luật là quy luật trao đổi hàng hóa. Sự tiêu dùng hàng hóa không thuộc về người bán đã chuyển nhượng nó đi, mà thuộc người mua đã tậu nó về.
Yeah, okay, that'll do for now. Great, thank you so much. Perfect. Great. So, what's happened is very important, I think. We think about a piece of writing. He said what the topic is, length of the working day, right? How long will I have to work for the money that you, the capitalist, have given me? But more importantly, in the second paragraph that you read, the capitalist is there saying his bit, I've paid my money, as the voice of the worker says what the complaints are. I give you a day, you pay, but you profit. And you know, the difference between the cost and the profit is surplus value extraction, right? We all know that argument. They're the concepts that he's laid out in the first 7 pages. But what's really important is this is the first time the voice of the worker has appeared in the book at all, right? Previously, it's been the capitalist who's gone to the market and bought labor and overheads, and you know, the money changer has been there, but never the worker. The voice of the worker finally rises up amidst the Sturm und Drang. What was the phrase? Au now net, thing on our now net, the noisy sphere of Sturm und Drang. It's like a hidden reference to Wagner. In the text, it's Sturm und Donald, but it's a reference to Wagnerian marching, you know, the Tempest type music. And the voice of the Nui Kongnan, the worker's lone voice amongst all this noise of production, speaks up against the capitalist. Okay? That sets out the argument, and then he talks about conditions and what's happening with the workers' complaints. They're about, the hours, the young children, and just the poverty of life under those those conditions, right? Then the next chapters, or the next sections of the chapter's in 7 parts, Marx uses a kind of ethnography. I mean, he's talking about the condition of the working class, and he uses the so-called blue books. The blue books, which were government reports on the condition of the factories. The British government sends out factory inspectors, especially Leonard Horner, whose name should never be forgotten in the annals of the whatever. Leonard Horner, he's the chief inspector of factories, and he goes out to kind of have a look for himself, right, like ethnography, at the condition of the factories. Of course, it's not so simple, because Leonard Horner is quite a well-to-do man. He eventually helped set up the University of London, right, becomes its first vice-chancellor. But so he goes north to the factories, and he's like a guest of the factory owners, come to inspect their factories. He has dinner with the factory owner and the factory owner's daughters. They all flirt and stuff. And then the next day he goes and inspects the factories. So of course they've presented the factories well. They've made it look tidy. They've hidden the children that are working for 16 hours, and they've cleaned up the conditions. There are children working for 12, 16, 18 hours. There are workers that are really up against it. Anyway, so he reports on the blue. He only reports on the conditions after the 1940s, really, because he says he doesn't have to do before 1840, not 1940, 1840, because Engels had already done that. In Engels' book, 1844, The Condition of the Working Class in England, which was also an ethnographic type report. Engels had spoken to a lot of Irish workers in Manchester because Engels' girlfriend was an Irish worker, and so he had access, and he wanted to report on their terrible conditions. Right? Their conditions are very oppressive. And anyway, Marx uses this kind of sort of ethnographic material, condition of the working class and the blue books. So all about conditions. But then he also, in the next section of this chapter, documents the efforts in the parliament of the factory inspectors to get legislation through that will, support the factory inspectors, who will support education for children. So they try to get legislation through the parliament that will ensure that children under 12 won't work more than 6 hours without a break, or that they each will get at least 2 hours per week of education. I mean, the reason you have compulsory schooling, right, until you're, 16, that starts then. In those days, there was no government compulsory schooling. They started with 2 hours per week for factory kids. Because, of course, the employers, they go along with this, they want a trained workforce. Trained by the government, great, excellent. And it increases. So Marx documents the struggles in the parliament, parliamentary policy, but also, of course, the bosses, the owners of capital, money bags, and so on. The capitalists fight back against that. They resist the legislation in the parliament, because the parliament is basically their representative body. The parliament is a committee of the bourgeoisie, right? Then Marx next documents the struggle of the workers, actual campaigns for a 10-hour day. After Marx is dead, it becomes an 8-hour day, but the 10-hour day as a campaign, and he documents that campaign as well. And finally then, he comes up with this conclusion that only when the workers, for protection against the serpent of their agonies, against the snake of capitalism, the labourers, they put their heads together as a class and compel the passing of a law, force those laws to go past. When the struggles force through a 10-hour day law, only then can they prevent themselves as a class from being sold into a kind of slavery. Without wage and hourly, without a limit to the working day, capital will try and exploit people for 12, 14, 16, whatever hours, as long as they can make the day. Without a government, without a legislative restriction, workers will be forced to do all this overtime. I mean, we're actually going back to those conditions now with email and always on and so on. But nonetheless, in this chapter, he concludes the chapter by saying only with this collective, I mean, stress the translation is pretty bad in the English. In German, zum Schutz gegen die Schlange ihrer Qualen. Snake of the psychology of the Arbeiter muss ihre Köpfe zusammenrotten und also class. They must smash their heads together, put their heads together as a class and become one body to fight against capital. So what we've seen, now let me show you in the Tingvet. Can check the translation. Muon Shong Lai Kongrang. Kongrang is snake, right? Serpent, snake, same thing. Are the agonies, right? This translation is almost direct. I didn't see any. You can see it better here. It should be the serpent, the labourers must put their heads together, in German, smash their heads together. Zusammenrotten, put their brains together into one body. What's key here is now, this is the end of the chapter. So you see there's a development. The workers will rise, put their heads together, and in one voice compel the passing of a law. One collective voice. Now it's interesting because all the way through Capital, Marx is talking about whether or not if commodities could speak, what would they say, and things like that. In fact, even the first sentence, if you translate the first sentence, the wealth of societies in which the capitalist mode of production prevails, presents itself as an immense accumulation of commodities, presents itself in English is a bad translation of erscheint als, which is like more like a theatre, appears as, it's also translated as appears as in English, puts in a performance or is like a ghostly spirit. It shines out as. The wealth of societies, it's a secret quotation of Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. The wealth of societies looks like an immense collection of commodities. In French, it's c'est annonce comme, announces itself as an immense collection of commodities. So commodities are always speaking, but they don't speak truth, right? And then the individual is speaking, the voice of the worker, but just a complaint about conditions It's only when the collective voice stands up and passes a 10-hour law that the length of the working day can be restricted. So this is the structure of his argument. He has pushed the argument from voice of the lone worker to the voice of the collective worker. And he's shown it with examples that move the argument along. He started with his main issue, and he ended with the answer to his main issue. This, I suggest to you, is the model of an ideal essay. If you can take your topic, your anthropologist that you choose, Marx or Engels or Ruth Benedict or Malinowski, and work out what your issue is and start with that, you make a good case for yourself. So like, can we take someone's topic and work through it? What do you say? I mean, I've seen quite a few essay plans that have got interesting material, but I think are a bit of a problem. Somebody has told you how to do an essay plan and it goes, or you've got it from a book. That seems very common, so somebody's presenting it in a soft skills class that I think isn't really up to the best kind of sociology. And it's the one where you go, introduce, and you give all sorts of bio data, to body, and there's some kind of argument, and 3, my opinion. Right? Now, those are the component parts. That's what we want, although we can do with a lot less bio than most people give. And usually it's like copied from Wikipedia or something, a whole lot of detail that's not necessary to the argument. But the body is this section. Sure, all your examples. But how you organize them is important. And it should be organized by your argument. What is your argument? So has someone got a plan like this that we can turn into this? Because I can do that for you. That's my magic. Do you have your plan handy? Anyone? What are you doing? What do you want to do? You want to risk it? You? Power? All right, come on down. Come on, come on. So, a big round of applause for our contestant number 1, please. Power, that's your topic. So you also have to choose an anthropologist. What are we writing about? Michael Tausig. Mick. You can call him Michael, but I can call him Mick because he's a very old friend. Mick Tausig, okay, power. And what can you tell us about him, about the topic? The devil and commodity fetishism. Yep. Yeah. What more can you tell us? What do you think your main concern is? Your main issue? You haven't decided yet, okay. Not enough. You need to decide some. Okay, so I can fill it in a little bit for you. Michael Tausig's book, Commodity Fetishism, The Devil in Commodity Fetishism. As you can guess, it's partly about commodities, but really the key part of that book is that the commodity of money is the devil. The workers in the mines, they're mine workers, believe in spirits, devils equal money. They really believe that in order to get money, you need to do a ritual of recognition of the devil that is money, to, like, as if you were worshipping ancestors, you must pay worship to the devil, then you'll get money. If you don't do that, you'll have an accident or lose money. All right, cool. So, have we got enough yet? One task you've been asked to do is to look at how, read the Michael Tausig and look at how they do research. Not just what they research about, but their methodology. What's his methodology? Do you know? Okay. So he does field work and interviews. Interviews. Now, he doesn't do formal interviews. He just chats with people a lot, especially while drinking. And he participates, right? The three togethers. He eats together, he talks together and drinks together. Not the same three, but still, they're togethers. And in drinking, and he ends up participating in some of these rituals. So he participates and drinks and ritual. The ritual that recognizes the devil. Okay? So now you have to think, what is going to be your argument? And this is not what I'm suggesting you should argue. This is one we're making up for today. That if you were the anthropologist, you too would have to do a deal with the devil to get knowledge. Because this is one of the things I'm asking you as well, to imagine that you are the one doing the research. Okay? So instead of all this, let's work it out. All right? This is just a fun one for the class, right? Doing research is a deal with the devil. This is going to be her argument, right? So this is going to be what it looks like. And the argument is going to prove that doing research is a deal with the devil. And the example is going to be doing field work, participating in drinking with the mine workers who believe in spirit devil money. Now, it turns out that money has the power of commodity fetishism. So it's Tausig's interest in both commodities and the devil that allows him to produce a book. All right? I think we could go 1, 2, 3. Powerful book. All right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Fieldwork done by Michael Tausig. Mick T does fieldwork, which is interviews mine workers by drinking with them. This is in the context of commodity fetishism and spirit belief, so that he produces his ethnography, ethno book of some power. Okay? So again, there's going to be Tausig and fieldwork, drinking, devil beliefs, powerful book. Okay? Now you need to read up. You need to get case studies and points. So 1, the mine workers, you need to read and find out how he went to the field, how he met the mine workers, how he worked with them. Drinking and knowledge, how only after drinking 6 bottles of wine or 3 bottles of tequila did they start to tell him what they really believed, and that whatever. The devil believes money and commodities. Devil. This is a Marxist argument, and Tausig, he is trained in Marxism as well. He was interested in that when he was previously, but he was also a doctor, trained before he did his PhD. So he's also interested in spiritualism and healing, or the spirit world. So here it's like Marx and spirit. You might want to even make an argument about Marx and religion, because a lot of people say that Marxism is against religion, right? Religion is the opium of the people. It's a famous quote from Marx. But pay attention to what Marx says. Marx says religion is the opium of the people. But if you expand the quote a little bit, he says, religion is the opium of the people, the first cry of the oppressed masses, the heart of a soulless world. That's not against religion. That's saying religion is an escape for those that don't have a political party yet. It's an opium to pain. So, you might get into all that. And that's why he writes a powerful book, which is still remembered some 35 years, 1984, 36 years later. And he becomes professor at Columbia. Very successful. So, in a way, because he became professor at Columbia University Anthropology Department, the best anthropology department in the world, some will say, he did a deal with the devil. Okay, so then your conclusion will be, so Tausig, like Tausig, we must honor local belief. And this will benefit us in the same way Yeah, sure. The Colombians do. Okay? So doing research is a deal with the devil. You've proven it. Right? You've shown that Michael Taussig and his deal with the mine workers who believe that the money comes to you with a deal with the devil. It's a commodity fetishism structure, the very structure that Marx talks about, but now living in the spirit world. And because of this, Taussig is able somehow to magically think these concepts through and make a book. So he's doing research, which is a deal with the devil. Detail, networking, fieldwork, mine workers, drinking with them, getting secrets, secret knowledge of spirits. Then their devil beliefs, that they believe money, commodity, devil. This is the structure of Marx's argument about commodity fetishism, right? That commodity fetish is like a devil that has stolen the real qualities of human being, their work, and turned it into something objective outside of itself, the money form or the commodity pile, that immense collection of commodities, right? But really, that's human labour there, objectified, magically turned into something that is not us, separated from us workers. Similarly, so his powerful book, which leaves him, goes into the world and people read and is remembered, is very powerful, is like a magic thing because he can then use it to get a job at Columbia University and be a respected professor, so that even people 36 years later are talking about him in Vietnam, as we're doing right now. So that's his deal with the devil, and that's what made him famous. You've magically proved your argument. Of course, Yen, you need nice stories. And this is really important for all of you. Think of how you can tell a story to introduce or to convey, to convince your point. So instead of saying, Michael Taussig meets the... You want to have, from the book, some anecdote. When Taussig first got to Columbia, he didn't know anyone. The first people he meets when he was buying himself some tequila at a bar. Tequila is blah, 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 blah. And I find a story that's interesting about tequila or something that smooths the way into... Use stories and anecdotes to tell your theoretical point. That's what Marx does all the time. He uses debates with others, he uses stories about the workers in Deptford or about the Civil War or about India to make his theoretical points stick. If you just give the theoretical points, people won't remember that. But if you give them a story to remember that helps them remember the theoretical point, it's good writing. So I would recommend you follow this structure more than you follow this intro body, my conclusion, because that bio stuff, we don't need to know. We can look it up on Wikipedia if we want to know that Michael Taussig is Australian or that he did his degree at LSE or something like that, right? What is relevant to your argument, that part? Start with your best idea, that doing a deal with the devil is how you do research. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, right? That was just a game for today. But that pushes the idea through the whole of the paper. Be driven by your idea. Anything else, forget it, cut it. Unnecessary, distraction. Mind you, remember the book is 3 volumes. There's a lot of distraction. You can go off on tangents as well if you're a good writer. Okay, who else? Someone else? Another one? Got time for one more? What's your topic? You want to? No? Do you? Come on then. Come on. Come on. No, up the front. Come quickly. Come on, come on. Yeah. No. I think it always is me, but some people don't think so. I think maybe you can say it's always interpretation. It's always a battle of interpretation. That's what politics is. You want to come? Great. All right. You got this? All right. What are we thinking through? I want you to remember this format, the vampire's teeth. Maybe I should do it like that. Because Marx talks about how the capitalist is a vampire, sucking the worker's flesh until that worker is... What is vampire in tiếng Việt? You know what vampire is in tiếng Việt? Huh? Empire. See if you can find the vampire part somewhere in there. Let's get this done. Quick, quick, quick. Okay, we're talking Claude Lévi-Strauss, research there, mythology. Case study is Leviticus. Leviticus Strauss? No, Levi-Strauss. Type autocorrect. Interest in myth, Greek mythology, heroes, human origin. 12 gods. 2 problems drawn from Greek mythology. The real substance manifested in the lives of the gods. Thinking about the matter of fate in Greek mythology. The Greeks called mythology the philosophical sensory of rational thinking of the times. Okay. I got you. This is really perfect, except I turn it upside down. Start with 5. Start with the Greeks say myth is thinking about today. All right? That's what you want to argue. You want to argue that. So, Levi-Strauss helps us think that, even though he talks mostly about Amerindia, and they are gone. Lost societies now because they all died out. It's really his thought process. And Okay, yeah. We can see in the structure of myth and two problems reflects contemporary France. All right? Start with this. The Greeks say myth is the present. This is what the Greeks say. Then Levi-Strauss' analysis of structure of myth, but then a critique of Levi-Strauss. Levi-Strauss finds in myth his own interest. He projects onto the myths the double problem. The double problem in Greek myth. It's not that Greek myth has a double problem, it's that Levi-Strauss finds a double problem in the myth. Right? So that's how he shows that, how looking at him shows that it's really contemporary problems that Levi-Strauss is feeling, but he's alienated. He's projected them onto myth. And we all do that. Levi-Strauss structure is projection. So then you would argue in the end that we don't understand Greek myth or today unless we understand that Levi-Strauss is talking about himself and French theory. Right? What he's done is absorbed the French time, how things are now, and then looked at Greek myth and seen that they are similar. What he sees in Greek mythology is actually his own world, but alienated, projected back into the past. So he's done exactly what the Greeks do. He's made a mythology of mythology. You see what I mean? His belief is that myths tell the story of the present in another world. Well, he's gone to another world, the Amerindians, and told the story of contemporary France. So I would do that.
Right, biology, Mike should say myth.
Greek myth, yeah. That's what I mean. Greek mythology. Just my shorthand. So I would just lose all of this. Cut. Don't need it. Start with this. Start. Yes, put that at the start. And then argue that case using case examples to show it. Again, follow this pattern, it will work. Does that make sense? We've gone too fast through this one. Write to me, send me this, I'll send it back to you, jumbled up again. We'll see if that helps. The thing that I mean here is the reflection theory. Levi-Strauss's way of working is to find something in the myths that resonates with him. He finds something in the mythology that he thinks resonates, and then he makes it into a structure. Well, we can read that as actually he projects present-day interests into the past, just like myths do for him. So it's like a circular argument. Greek mythology is present day thinking. Levi-Strauss's structure is the structure of France projected onto Greek. I mean, this is not the only critique of Levi-Strauss that's possible. Only some people make that critique, and you can do the research and find them if you wanted. If you wanted to look at Godelier or something, you can read more of Levi-Strauss and find out where he does that. He keeps on saying, these myths are like the French, blah, 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 blah. This story is like the French story of. These people are painted like playing cards in contemporary France. He does that over and over. I think the argument would stand up. Okay, next week, I forget what we're talking about, but we'll again do a lecture and then do this kind of brainstorming of your topic. So bring your topic with you and we'll work through it. Whatever your topic is next week, we can do, I don't know, whatever anthropologist you're chosen and so on. But try and avoid that Wikipedia style bio note stuff. That doesn't really add much at all. Thank you very much. See you. End the recording here.